When people hear the word greatness, they usually think of scale, bigger influence, higher status, wider recognition, more visible success. Greatness, in most human systems, is measured by how many people know your name, how much power you hold, and how many others arrange themselves around your importance. That was true in the ancient world, and it is still true now. But Jesus walks straight into that instinct and overturned it. One of the clearest moments comes in Mark 10. James and John come to Jesus with a bold request. They want to sit at his right and left in his glory. It is an astonishing scene, not only because of what they ask, but because it reveals how even those closest to Jesus still misunderstand the kind of kingdom he is bringing. They hear him speak of glory, kingdom, and coming vindication, and their minds immediately move toward rank. They want nearness to power. They want a place above the others. They want greatness in the form human beings usually recognize it. And when the other disciples hear about it, they become angry, not because they understand Jesus better, but because the same desire is alive in them too. The argument reveals that the disciples are not just confused about one request, they are still carrying the world's definition of greatness inside themselves. That is the setting in which Jesus speaks. He says, "You know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. Whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." That is not a small correction. It is a redefinition. Jesus begins with what everybody already knows. The nations understand greatness through domination, hierarchy, and control. The higher you rise, the more others serve your purposes. The powerful are surrounded by people who carry their burdens, protect their image, advance their interests, and make visible their superiority. Greatness is upward. It is public. It is measurable in terms of access, privilege, and command. Jesus does not deny that this is how the world works. He names it clearly. You know that. In other words, this is obvious. This is the normal order of fallen human life. Then comes the shock. But it shall not be so among you. That is kingdom language. Jesus is not simply saying, try to be more humble than most leaders. He is saying that in the community he is forming, the whole logic must change. Greatness cannot mean the same thing among his followers as it means in the world around them. His kingdom does not merely lower the tone of ambition. It transforms the structure of ambition itself. And notice how serious the language becomes. Jesus does not say the great person should occasionally serve. He says the great must become servant, and the first must become slave of all. That is not a suggestion to add some kindness to ordinary power. It is a complete inversion of what people naturally seek in the first century world. This would have landed with real force. Servants and slaves were not symbols of self-fulfillment or noble simplicity. They occupied low positions in the social imagination. Their role was not to be admired for prestige. It was to bear the needs and commands of others. So when Jesus uses that language, he is not romanticizing service in a vague way. He is taking the category society placed below honor and saying, this is where greatness is now to be understood. Why? Because the kingdom of God reveals what God is like. That is why Jesus grounds the teaching in himself. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. The title, Son of Man, carries weight. It echoes Daniel 7, where the Son of Man receives dominion, glory, and a kingdom. Jesus takes that image of exalted authority and joins it to service and self-giving death. The one who truly has authority does not display it through domination. He displays it through giving himself away. That means Jesus is not merely offering a better leadership style. He is revealing the heart of his mission. His greatness is not proved by how many attend him, but by how fully he gives himself for others to give his life as a ransom for many. That is the climax. Service is not decorative in Jesus' life. It is not a public relation virtue. It leads all the way to the cross. He does not simply lower himself in mood. He pours himself out in obedience. So when Jesus redefines greatness, he is doing more than correcting the disciples' manners. He is exposing a clash between two kingdoms. In one kingdom, greatness means rising above others. In the other, greatness means pouring yourself out in love, faithfulness, and costly service. In one kingdom, people gather others beneath them. In the other, the truly great willingly go low for the good of others. That is what this teaching meant then. It meant the disciples could not carry ordinary human ambition unchanged into the kingdom of God. They could not take the desire for superiority, attach spiritual language to it, and call it holiness. Jesus was forming a people whose understanding of honor, power, and significance would look strange to the world, because it would be shaped by the servant king himself. The towel, in Jesus' kingdom, is not beneath the throne. It is the path to it. Modern people still misunderstand this teaching, though often in different ways. One common mistake is to hear Jesus redefining greatness and turn it into a soft slogan about humility. Something like, "Do not be arrogant. Be nice to people. Stay grounded. Remember that everybody matters." Those things are not false, but they are far too thin. Jesus is not merely adjusting the tone of ambition. He is confronting ambition at its roots. Because the real issue is not bad manners. It is the human desire to be above. We want importance that can be seen. We want influence that confirms our worth. We want positions that make others notice, that fear, praise, and depend on us. Even when the language becomes spiritual, the instinct often remains the same. People want to be known as the most gifted, the most wise, the most anointed, the most respected, the most significant, and then they may use ministry, service, morality, or even sacrifice as a new way to secure superiority. That is one of the dangers modern Christians often miss. The ego can wear humble clothing. It can seek greatness through visible goodness, just as easily as through obvious pride. A person may speak often about serving, yet still be deeply attached to recognition. Another may work tirelessly for others, but inwardly live on being needed. Another may reject worldly status while quietly building a spiritual form of status. So if we read Jesus' teaching too quickly, we can turn servant language into a subtler ladder to climb. But Jesus does not bless that. He does not say, "Be servants so that everyone will see how great you really are." He says, "The great must be servants." In other words, the measure changes. Greatness is not first revealed by visibility, platform, or applause. It is revealed by the shape of one's love. Another mistake is to confuse service with weakness. In the modern mind, especially in competitive cultures, serving can sound passive, unimpressive, or low value. It can sound like settling for less. People assume that strong people lead and weaker people serve. But Jesus destroys that entire imagination by locating true greatness in voluntary self-giving. A servant in Jesus' teaching is not great because he lacks strength. He is great because he uses strength rightly. He does not exploit power for self-exaltation. He spends himself for the good of others. That is not weakness. That is moral strength. And the cross makes this even clearer. There is nothing weak in Christ's obedience. There is meekness, yes. But meekness is not fragility. It is strength under God's rule. Jesus does not go to the cross because he cannot avoid it. He goes because he is utterly obedient to the Father and utterly committed to the redemption of others. Modern people also get this teaching wrong. By separating service from truth and holiness, they imagine that servant-heartedness means always pleasing people, never confronting wrongdoing, never exercising authority, never leading clearly. But Jesus himself disproves that. He serves without becoming vague. He loves without becoming morally soft. He gives himself without surrendering truth. This matters because some people hear greatness is service and assume that any use of authority must be suspect. But Jesus is not abolishing authority. He is cleansing it. In the world, authority is often used to take. In the kingdom, authority must be used to bless, protect, build, and bear responsibility. The problem is not leadership itself. The problem is leadership shaped by self-interest. So Christian greatness is not anti-leadership. It is anti-self-exaltation. There is another modern misunderstanding that is even more subtle. Sometimes people hear this teaching and reduce it to occasional acts of charity. Serve once in a while. Volunteer somewhere. Do good things for others. That may be part of obedience, but it still misses the center. Jesus is not adding service to an otherwise self-centered life. He is demanding a whole new posture. A truly self-centered person can still perform visible acts of service. People do this all the time for approval, influence, branding, guilt management, or identity. But the kingdom Jesus announces goes deeper. It asks whether your life is fundamentally arranged around yourself or around love under the reign of God. That is why this teaching is so hard. It does not merely ask whether you help people, it asks whether you still need to be above them. And perhaps the most serious modern mistake is to admire Jesus' definition of greatness while continuing to live by the world's definition in practice. Many Christians can speak beautifully about servanthood while quietly organizing their lives around achievement, image, reach, status, and personal advancement. The language changes, but the structure often remains familiar. Visibility equals value. Influence equals importance. Being known equals mattering. Jesus will not allow that equation because in his kingdom, a hidden act of faithful love may be greater than a celebrated display of talent, a mother wearing herself out in patient care, a father quietly bearing responsibility, a believer refusing resentment and serving in obscurity, a person doing honest work without applause, a leader carrying others instead of using them. These may display more of the kingdom than things the world calls impressive. That is not because the kingdom despises gifts, excellence, or leadership. It is because all of those must be reordered under self-giving love. What modern people often miss, then, is that Jesus did not merely say, "Try to be humble." He exposed the whole architecture of human greatness and replaced it with something the world does not naturally honor. He taught that the highest life is not found in securing more for the self, but in being conformed to the servant king. That is not motivational advice. It is a direct challenge to the false self. Most people spend years building. So, what does faithful obedience to this teaching look like now? It begins with telling the truth about ambition. Not all ambition is evil. Human beings are made to desire, to build, create, led, and labor. The problem is not that we want our lives to matter. The problem is that we often want them to matter in ways that keep the self enthroned. We want importance without surrender. We want influence without sacrifice. We want significance that others can see more easily than God can measure. Jesus does not call us to kill all desire. He calls us to let desire be crucified and reordered. That means the first step in obedience is asking not simply, "What do I want to become?" but, "Why do I want it? Do I want this role, this success, this recognition, this ministry, this leadership? Because I long to be useful to God and others? Or because I need my life to feel above ordinary faithfulness? Do I want to carry responsibility? Or do I want to be seen carrying responsibility?" Those are uncomfortable questions, but necessary ones. Faithful obedience also means learning to serve where no status is returned. That is where much false greatness dies. Anyone can serve when service increases reputation. Anyone can help when help is noticed. Anyone can appear humble when humility becomes part of a compelling image. But Jesus presses us toward forms of faithfulness that strip away those rewards. Service in hidden places. Service toward difficult people. Service that costs time, comfort, patience, and emotional energy. Service that does not quickly become a story you can tell about yourself. Why? Because hidden service reveals what kind of heart is actually present. If you can only serve where your contribution is visible, then service may still be another way of being first. But if you can serve where only God sees, something deeper is beginning to form. Faithful obedience also reshapes leadership itself. If you have responsibility over others in a home, church, workplace, ministry, or any sphere Jesus' teaching does not tell you to stop leading. It tells you to lead in a way that refuses to feed on others. Do you use people to carry your ego? Or do you use your position to carry their good? Do you make yourself heavier in the room? Or do you make room for others to flourish? Do people around you feel used, managed, and drained, or protected, strengthened, and served? That is a searching test, because greatness in Jesus' kingdom is not measured by how many people serve your calling. It is measured by how willingly you spend yourself for the good of others under the will of God. And this kind of obedience changes how we think about ordinary life. It means that quiet faithfulness is not second class. It means the hidden work of love is not less real because it is not public. It means the believer, who never becomes impressive in the world's eyes, may still be far greater in the kingdom than someone with wide recognition and shallow love. It also means we must become suspicious of the parts of ourselves that constantly look for height, the need to be first in conversation, the desire to always be credited, the resentment when others are praised, the urge to turn every good thing into proof of our own importance. These are not small quirks. They are signs that the old definition of greatness is still alive in us. So faithful obedience will often look like very practical surrender. It may mean doing work that serves others without drawing attention to it. It may mean letting someone else be seen while you remain in the background. It may mean carrying responsibility without demanding admiration for carrying it. It may mean repenting of the quiet anger that rises when your service goes unnoticed. It may mean choosing the good of another person over the strengthening of your own image. It may mean staying faithful in a place that feels too ordinary for your ego. It may mean leading with clarity and strength, but not turning leadership into self-display. It may mean asking, in every sphere of life, am I using what I have to rise above others or to bless them under Christ? And none of this is possible for long without looking steadily at Jesus himself. Because if greatness is merely turned into a moral burden, People will either despair or perform, but when we look at Christ, we see that the deepest reality in the universe is not self-exalting power, but holy, self-giving love. The Son of God did not protect himself from the cost of obedience. He took the form of a servant. He went low. He gave himself, and precisely there, the truth about greatness was revealed. So the call is not merely, try harder to be less proud. The call is, come under the rule of the King whose greatness was shown in service, and let that greatness reshape your whole imagination. That leads to a final question. What do you call great right now? Not what sounds right in church language, but what actually moves you. What do you envy? What do you chase? What makes you feel significant? What kind of life seems weighty and valuable to you? Answer that honestly, and you may begin to see which kingdom has been forming you. Then begin with one act of obedience, not a dramatic vow. One act, serve where nothing comes back. Choose faithfulness over visibility. Carry someone else's burden without making it part of your identity. Lay down one small claim to being first, because Jesus did not come to decorate the world's understanding of greatness with spiritual language. He came to overthrow it. He came to form a people who would no longer measure life by height, applause, or control, but by love, sacrifice, and faithfulness under the reign of God. That is why he redefined greatness, and until we let him redefine it for us, we may admire his words while still living by the old kingdom. So ask yourself, with seriousness, where am I still trying to be great in the way the world understands greatness? Bring that before Christ, and then go low in one concrete way today. That is where the old self begins to die. And that is where true greatness begins.